And so I need to ask you for your advice if you were a Stanford undergrad today. So if you had a Freaky Friday moment, tomorrow you wake up and suddenly you're 19 inside of a Stanford undergrad, knowing everything you know, what would you do? Would you drop out?
I'd be very happy. I would feel like I was like coming of age at the luckiest time, like in several centuries probably. I think the degree to which the world is gonna change and the opportunity to impact that, starting a company, doing AI research, any number of things is like quite remarkable. I think this is probably the best time to start. I think I would say this. I think this is probably the best time to start a company since the internet, at least, and maybe kind of like in the history of technology. I think with what you can do with AI is like gonna just get more remarkable every year, and the greatest companies get created at times like this. The most impactful new products get built at times like this. So I would feel incredibly lucky, and I would be determined to make the most of it, and I would go figure out like where I wanted to contribute and do it.
And do you have a bias on where would you contribute? Would you want to stay as a student? And if so, would you major in a certain major, given the pace of change?
Probably I would not stay as a student, but only because like I didn't, and I think it's like reasonable to assume people kind of are going to make the same decisions they would make again. I think staying as a student is a perfectly good thing to do. It would probably not be what I would have picked.
No, and this is you. This is you. So you have the Freaky Friday moment. It's you. You're reborn as a 19-year-old. And would you? Yeah.
What I think I would, again, like I think this is not a surprise because people kind of are going to do what they're going to do. I think I would go work on AI research.
And where might you do that, Sam?
I mean, obviously I have a bias towards OpenAI, but I think anywhere I could like do meaningful AI research, I would be like very thrilled about.
So you'd be agnostic if that's academia or private industry?
I say this with sadness. I think I would pick industry, realistically. I think you kind of need to be at a place with so much compute.
Okay. And if you did join on the research side, would you join? So we had Kazar here last week, who was a big advocate of not being a founder, but actually joining an existing company to sort of learn the chops. For the students that are wrestling with, should I start a company now at 19 or 20, or should I go join another entrepreneurial, either research lab or venture, what advice would you give them?
Well, since he gave the case to join a company, I'll give the other one, which is I think you learn a lot just starting a company. And if that's something you want to do at some point, there's this thing Paul Graham says, but I think it's like very deeply true. There's no pre-startup like there is pre-med. You kind of just learn how to run a startup by running a startup. And if that's what you're pretty sure you want to do, you may as well jump in and do it.
And so let's say, if somebody wants to start a company, they want to be in AI, what do you think are the biggest near-term challenges that you're seeing in AI that are the ripest for a startup? And just to scope that, what I mean by that are, what are the holes that you think are the top priority needs for OpenAI that OpenAI will not solve in the next 3 years? Yeah.
So I think this is like a very reasonable question to ask in some sense, but I think I'm not going to answer it because I think you should never take this kind of advice about what startup to start ever from anyone. I think by the time there's something that is like the kind of thing that's obvious enough that me or somebody else will sit up here and say it, it's probably like not that great of a startup idea. And I totally understand the impulse. And I remember when I was just like asking people like, what startup should I start? But I think like one of the most important things I believe about having an impactful career is you have to chart your own course. If the thing that you're thinking about is something that someone else is going to do anyway, or more likely something that a lot of people are going to do anyway, you should be like somewhat skeptical of that. And I think a really good muscle to build is coming up with the ideas that are not the obvious ones to say. So I don't know what the really important idea is that I'm not thinking of right now, but I'm very sure someone in this room does it, knows what that answer is. And I think learning to trust yourself and come up with your own ideas and do the very like non-consensus things, like when we started OpenAI, that was an extremely non-consensus thing to do. And now it's like the very obvious thing to do. Now I only have the obvious ideas because I'm just like stuck in this one frame, but I'm sure you all have the other ones.
But so can I ask it another way? And I don't know if this is fair or not, but what questions then are you wrestling with that no one else is talking about?
How to build really big computers. I mean, I think other people are talking about that, but we're probably like looking at it through a lens that no one else is quite imagining yet. I mean, we're definitely wrestling with how when we make not just like grade school or middle schooler level intelligence, but like PhD level intelligence and beyond, the best way to put that into a product, the best way to have a positive impact with that on society and people's lives, we don't know the answer to that yet. So I think that's like a pretty important thing to figure out.
Okay. And can we continue on that thread then of how to build really big computers, if that's really what's on your mind? Can you share, I know there's been a lot of speculation and probably a lot of hearsay too about the semiconductor foundry endeavor that you are reportedly embarking on. Can you share what would make, what's the vision? What would make this different than
it's not
others
really
that are out there?
just foundries, although that's part of it. It's like, if you believe, which we increasingly do at this point, that AI infrastructure is going to be one of the most important inputs to the future, this commodity that everybody's going to want, and that is energy, data centers, chips, chip design, new kinds of networks. It's how we look at that entire ecosystem and how we make a lot more of that. And I don't think it'll work to just look at one piece or another, but we got to do the whole thing.
Okay, so there's multiple big problems.
Yeah, I think like just this is the arc of human technological history as we build bigger and more complex systems.
And does it grow, so, in terms of just like the compute cost, correct me if I'm wrong, but ChatGPT 3 was, I've heard it was $100 million to do the model, and it was 175 billion parameters. GPT-4 cost $400 million with 10x the parameters. It was almost 4x the cost, but 10x the parameters. Correct me, adjust me. You know it, I don't.
I do know it, but I won't.
Oh, you can. You're invited to. This is Stanford, Sam. Okay. But even if you don't want to correct the actual numbers, if that's directionally correct, does the cost, do you think, keep growing with each subsequent? Yes. And does it keep growing multiplicatively?
Probably. I mean,
and so then the question then becomes, how do you capitalize that?
Well, look, I kind of think that giving people really capable tools and letting them figure out how they're going to use this to build the future is a super good thing to do and is super valuable. And I am super willing to bet on the ingenuity of you all and everybody else in the world to figure out what to do about this. So there is probably some more business-minded person than me at OpenAI somewhere that is worried about how much we're spending, but I kind of don't.
Okay, so that doesn't cross it. So, OpenAI is phenomenal. ChatGPT is phenomenal. Everything else, all the other models are phenomenal. You burned $520 million of cash last year. That doesn't concern you in terms of thinking about the economic model of how do you actually, where's going to be the monetization source?
Well, first of all, that's nice of you to say, but ChatGPT is not phenomenal. Like, ChatGPT is like mildly embarrassing at best. GPT-4 is the dumbest model any of you will ever have to use again by a lot. But it's like important to ship early and often, and we believe in iterative deployment. Like, if we go build AGI in a basement, and then the world is like kind of blissfully walking blindfolded along. I don't think that makes us like very good neighbors. So I think it's important, given what we believe is going to happen, to express our view about what we believe is going to happen. But more than that, the way to do it is to put the product in people's hands and let society co-evolve with the technology. Let society tell us what it collectively and people individually want from the technology, how to productize this in a way that's going to be useful, where the model works really well, where it doesn't work really well. Give our leaders and institutions time to react. Give people time to figure out how to integrate this into their lives, to learn how to use the tool. I'm sure some of you all like cheat on your homework with it, but some of you all probably do like very amazing, wonderful things with it too. And as each generation goes on, I think that will expand. And that means that we ship imperfect products but we have a very tight feedback loop, and we learn and we get better. And it does kind of suck to ship a product that you're embarrassed about, but it's much better than the alternative. And in this case in particular, where I think we really owe it to society to deploy iteratively, one thing we've learned is that AI and surprise don't go well together. People don't want to be surprised. People want a gradual rollout and the ability to influence these systems. That's how we're going to do it. And there could totally be things in the future that would change where we think iterative deployment isn't such a good strategy. But it does feel like the current best approach that we have. And I think we've gained a lot from doing this. And hopefully the larger world has gained something too. Whether we burn 500 million a year or 5 billion or 50 billion a year, I don't care. I genuinely don't. As long as we can, I think, stay on a trajectory where eventually we create way more value for society than that, and as long as we can figure out a way to pay the bills, like we're making AGI. It's going to be expensive. It's totally worth it.
And so do you have I hear you. Do you have a vision in 2030 of what, if I say you crushed it, Sam, it's 2030, you crushed it, what does the world look like to you?
Maybe in some very important ways, not that different. Like, we will be back here. There will be like a new set of students. We'll be talking about how startups are really important. Technology is really cool. We'll have this new great tool in the world. It would feel amazing if we got to teleport forward 6 years today and have this thing that was like smarter than humans in many subjects and could do these complicated tasks for us. And, like we could have these like complicated program written or this research done or this business started. And yet like the sun keeps rising, people keep having their human dramas, life goes on. So sort of like super different in some sense that we now have like abundant intelligence at our fingertips. And then in some other sense, like not different at all.